everybody doing tonight? Welcome to this week's meeting of the Georgia Tea Party. My name is Michael Williams, and I have the great honor of serving on the board of directors of the Georgia Tea Party. Can I have a volunteer to open us in prayer tonight? Yes, sir.
Would you stand with me? Father in heaven, we thank you for the joy of being an American. Father, our land is in great trouble. Father, we pray that you would use us, that we can find your will for our land, that we can have the humility that is necessary for the promise of 2 Chronicles 7:14. It is my people, but called by my name, will humble themselves and pray and seek my face. And I will hear their prayers from heaven, and I will forgive their sins, and I will heal their land. Father, we need it. We need it badly. We need it quickly. Help us to be about your business. Help us to be kind with one another. Yet let us never deny the truth. We pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. All right.
Would you all please join me in the pledge to the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
As I said before, my name is Michael Williams. I serve on the board of directors of the Georgia Tea Party. I want to give other board members a chance to introduce themselves. Introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Jiggy Denbury. Tom Malloy. Fields Cersei. Bill Hudson.
Sue Stanton.
All right. Can I see a show of hands if you are here for the first time tonight at a meeting of the Georgia Tea Party? First time here tonight. Something that we do every week here, no pressure, but we always extend the invitation. If you're here for the first time and you would like to stand and introduce yourself, just tell us what brought you out tonight. We like to extend that invitation. Anybody feeling brave? Yes, sir.
Hi, everyone. I'm Scott McDaniel. I love my country. I do not like what is happening to my country. I finally decided I needed to get off my sofa and do something about it. You will
Came to the right place.
In the back there, yes, sir.
My name's Ted Weinberg. I've been trying to free up my Thursday nights for several months now and finally succeeded. It's a pleasure to be here. I am so aligned with your values and your goals. So thank you for all that you do, and I'm looking forward to being a part of it.
Great. Anybody else? Go for it.
Hey, I'm Heath Garrett. I've been working in conservative campaign causes for the last 17 years, and it's my first time. I'm an honorary. I'm actually a member of the Madison Forum, and long time worked with many of you in the room on any number of great causes and campaigns over the last 2 years. I'm glad to be here tonight.
All right, anybody else? Yes, sir.
I'm Mitch Hunter, and I've spent my last 10 years working in conservative politics. I also had the opportunity to work with several of y'all in the room tonight. Glad to be here.
All right, last call. Anybody else? All right, that's every single week that we meet, we have new people here, and I'm always at a loss for words. There's so many different reasons that bring people out to these meetings, and I just love hearing them. We have a packed schedule tonight. You picked a good night to come out. Had a note left on this podium right before the meeting started. I guess it was left yesterday or earlier today. Apparently there's a Boy Scout troop that meets in this room, and they're having a food drive. They wanted me to make the Georgia Tea Party aware. If anybody would like to donate, they can donate I guess, food over here during the month of March. So FYI, if you'd like to do that, they left a note, so there it is.
You know what you're going to do with it?
No idea. I would assume somebody's going to eat it at some point.
Does it help you get a badge?
The doesn't specify. How about I find out about that and I'll let you know. There's some maybe there's some information on the flyers they left. I put them on the table back there, so be aware.
The sign says they're supporting Storehouse Ministries.
Great, there you go. Moving right along. If you had a name badge in the last order we just put in, I should have it with me tonight, so see me sometime tonight to collect it and pay for it if you haven't paid for it, and otherwise just pick it up if you've already paid for it. Lots been going on lately. Show of hands, who was at the debate last night? Pretty strong turnout last night at the debate. It was quite an interesting night. Our friend Lance Lamberton presented his case, I believe, very clearly and eloquently last night. I believe he did an excellent job. We have a round of applause for Lance real quick? Beth?
It's going to be replayed this Saturday on Channel 23 at 1 o'clock.
Great.
In the afternoon.
Good.
And you can see it anytime you like by going on MDJ Online.
Okay.
And it's all there. And you can watch the film.
MDJ Online, the Marietta Daily Journal site, apparently has a poster. It's going to replay on TV 23 on Saturday night.
Marietta Patch has the East Cobb.
Lance? And it will be on Lance's, the Cobb County Taxpayers Association website? VoteNoMarch15.com, right. You may have noticed the signs at the front of the room. Lance, we're accepting donations for those, is that right? Come on up. Mark is going to strangle me if I don't make you come up to the podium and talk into the mic, so...
What I'd like to say about the signs is if you don't have the money and you need a sign, I'll give them to you for free. But if you can donate towards the signs, towards the cost, so that we'll have money to make more signs and or do some other kinds of advertising or publicity for the cause. Just give you a brief summation. Can you hear me back there? Okay. All right. I don't project very well unless I have a microphone. Basically, what we have in front of us, it's only 3 weeks to go. Early voting has already started. Our job, what we have in front of us, is to get these signs out. We've distributed about 600, so about 400 more need to be distributed. So if you want a sign, if you know where to place them, now's the time to get them out. And starting March 1st is when we need to get them in the public rights of way. You've got to be careful about that, because if you put them up too soon, they'll get taken down, and then they'll lose their effectiveness. So a good rule of thumb is to get them out on a Friday night, so at the very least, the signs will be out there until Monday morning. And then that's usually when the county and city crews come along and sweep them up, and I see a hand coming up.
Just a rule of thumb, if you put them behind the telephone pole, that's usually safe. If you put them in front of the telephone pole, chances are they're going to get yanked up.
Right. And the night before the election, we're going to, if you put them out, gather up what you have distributed that's still out there, and then place them at your local polling places within 150 feet. That's the rule. Okay. We also have, as Tom can, literature that we have, not me, but the Georgia Tea Party has put out, which is a very nice, colorful piece, and we need to get those out. So if you live in subdivisions and you want to get a nice little exercise on a beautiful day, put them on the mailboxes, not in the mailbox, but on the mailbox, and that would be very helpful. One other thing we're working on right now, and it's not in stone yet, and we're working on it, is to try to hold a tax rally. We're going to call it Rock the Splost on March 13th. And we're trying to line up speakers such as former Congressman Bob Barr, who is also doing a robocall for us. And there's a good chance that once we get that rolling, some of you might receive that robocall. And it's very well written 30-second script, because I wrote it. But as far as this Rock the Splost rally we're talking about on March 13th, which would be Sunday in Glover Park between 1 and 2 o'clock, I'm in the process of trying to get the Marietta Police Department to give me a permit. I went to them Monday and applied for the permit. They called me the next day. They needed some information. I haven't heard back from them. I don't want to be cynical and think that they're dragging their feet because they don't support the SPLOST, but, you know, I have reason to be paranoid. If anybody here has an in with the Marietta Police Department and maybe could help move that along, that would be awful nice. But if we have this rally, we definitely want to have it co-sponsored with the Tea Party. I'm making an assumption, Tom. I'm making an assumption that if we have this rally, that it will be co-sponsored by the Tea Party.
Well, I would have to. I can't speak for the board. We have to make that decision.
Okay.
We'll cross that bridge when we come.
Well, as I say, it's not set in stone yet, so you know, maybe I'm getting a little ahead of myself. But now that I'm up here and talking about it, I just wanted to give you a heads up. That's basically what's going on. Thanks a lot, and thanks for coming out for your support on the SPLOST.
Quick comment.
Sir.
I live on the end of a cul-de-sac, only 4 houses on my side, so I've been carrying it with me when I park in public places. I try to get where there's foot traffic. I put it in my windshield. That makes a big billboard.
That's all. All right, great. Thanks a lot, folks.
Flowers in our back window, the big red sign.
Yeah, put it in your car. That's a great idea. That's a great idea.
Take it away from you then.
Yeah, well, okay. Thanks a lot, folks.
Administration.
Yeah, I was the Deputy Director of the White House Office of Policy Information during the first term, and I articulated administration policy on a number of domestic issues, and the one that I'm most proud of, or the two I'm most proud of, is the administration's position on tuition tax credits and the balanced budget bill.
All right, so for those of you who were at the debate last night, anybody want to give just a report on their observation of the debate from yesterday? I didn't really prepare anything to say. I was only there for the last about half hour or so. Bill or Field or anybody who was there last night want to just report on how it went? Pat?
Well, the article in the Marietta Journal today.
Come on. Mark is going to strangle me if you don't talk into the mic. No pressure.
Today's Marietta Journal gave, they wrote an article about the debate. How many of you saw that? Okay. Oh, he's got it. The point that struck me was that when Lance was quoted, he had facts, he had, his presentation was just right on track. And if you heard it last night, what absolutely blew me away is his sense of humor. I mean, he injected that into the dialogue, and just made us pay attention and look at him as a real person. So I was tremendously impressed. But then when the MDJ started writing about Rose Wing, every paragraph said, and she repeated numerous times, blah, 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 the 30% and the bond rating, and da, da, da. And our children are going to die.
I'm sad I missed that part.
Yeah. And then Lance said, you know, that sounded like Armageddon, and that he was offended that she said that if we didn't vote for the SPLOST, that children would die, and it would be on us because of roads. And yes!
Why are children driving cars on
Yes,
the roads?
she said it. Because ambulance couldn't get through, and the roads and the blah blah blah.
So Pat, what
Anyway.
was your impression of just the mood in the room that night? I mean, But what was the atmosphere in the room?
The
during
mood in the
debate?
room was just, we were like here. It was up. People were happy. We were all together. You know, we were like leaning on each other and encouraging each other.
Like a lot of Lance's signs out there that came out every now and then.
Yeah.
He'd hit a good line and just all the signs.
And I'll have to commend the moderator.
Did an
The
excellent job.
moderator was awesome, and we actually were very bad a couple of times when she warned us. I mean, she didn't warn us. She's very dignified, and she said, please, let's adhere to the rules of the debate and not, make any noise or whatever, how she put it. And still, a couple of times, we got out of hand and put our signs up and clapped. So, that wasn't too good.
Yeah.
But, you can hardly stand it. You're just, your heart overflows.
See, that's the beauty if we can get this tax rally going, because then you'll have a chance to blow off steam and really make a lot of noise, and nobody will tell you to be quiet, because that's the purpose of it. So I really want to have fun if we can get this tax rally going.
Good.
Yeah, let's do it at a rally, but not at that poor lady's,
All right.
because she was very dignified. And
She did an excellent job.
She did. Okay.
All right.
That's what I remember.
Thank you, Pat. The debate was, in my opinion, was definitely the place to be last night. It was quite the show, I'll tell you that. So I also wanted to have a report on the federal task force's meeting with Congressman Gingrey last night, but Eric and Patty and Jim are not here. Mark, you were there. You want to give a quick report on the meeting from yesterday? Great. Come on up, Mark. Mark Lane, everybody, with our federal task force. Now, Mark, be sure you speak into the mic, all right?
Be quick too. I'll be short. But Patty Pratt and I, Patty, come on up. We've been pleased last week. The Georgia Tea Party met with Tom Price personally, and Patty and JD and I met, and we shared the issues that we were concerned about, and then we asked how we could help you, and we also asked if you could give us information that we wouldn't know from the press about really what's going on in Congress. So we've got some open dialogues now, and then last night we had a larger meeting with the Federal Task Force with Phil Gingrey and his entourage, and he brought us pizza, so there is some advantages to being in the Federal Task Force. And he was very open and enthusiastic about being part of you and this organization, because he knows that you folks out there have a lot of influence over people. And Phil is he's talented, and he's on the right side of the Constitution, but he's also a politician, and he knows that you folks have the influence, so he wants your support.
Right.
And,
So we went over, we took him through our federal priorities.
We went through all the priorities, then we went through the committees that he's on.
We went through his list of bills that he's introduced this year.
He showed us about 15 bills that he's introduced, and why it's important to sponsor a bill, because if anybody changes that bill, it's got to go back to the original sponsor, who can decide if they want to make that change or not. So it is good that Tom Price and Phil Gingrey and Tom Graves up in North Georgia make these kind of sponsor bills, because then we have a little more control over it. So we learned a lot about it. And
now the congressman stayed with us until, the meeting started around 6, and he stayed with us until 7:45 last night, correct?
Yeah.
Or later, almost till 8 even.
And he told us towards the end of the meeting he had another meeting scheduled at 7 o'clock, but he had decided to meet with us longer. He felt it was more important.
The last thing I'll say is there's a very important, and you can help me remember this, but there is a congressional resolution or something where there's 60 days. Do you remember what the name of that was?
It's the constitutional review.
Well, there's a...
That has 60 days in which to go...
Is it the congressional review language?
Yeah, 60 days to go back to the EPA when they do their spilled milk. I mean, I'll heard about that too. Or the net neutrality.
Yeah, this is a big deal when President Obama, and I usually don't say it that way, but President Obama will have an administration make a law, like the EPA taking over carbon, that the Congress can use the 60-day congressional review
and say that they can't do that. So we actually missed that carbon date, but they're looking at the internet law where the FCC is trying to regulate or have some regulation over the internet. In any event, this is a new regulation the Congress is going to implement and use a lot to stop administrative executive rules that are unconstitutional. So they're on top of that.
Question right here first.
Both the House and the Senate have to.
You know, I had a discussion today on the phone when I was giving another review about it, and we think that it's just a House.
Yeah, these are
rule.
rules of the House, basically.
Right.
So the House can stop it by themselves.
Right.
More or less.
We also talked about other laws that they're trying to pass that Phil Gingrey, Anton Price says, well, they have zero chance because they've got to go through the Senate too, which means, you know, so basically they told us where they had a chance at something and where they didn't have a chance at something, but this is what we're trying to do. So the bottom line is we've got a great bat phone to our congressmen through this organization that you all can participate in.
All right, question right here.
Mark, when a handful of people like you met with Price or Gingrey and discussed certain bills that they have introduced and would like, would you be kind enough to kind of bullet email the rest of us so we can be aware of what went on, so we are more engaged with, as a group?
That's a good request.
With the dialogue of what's going on, and because not everybody can come to every single meeting,
Right.
and it would be nice
So probably with Eric being the information guy in the federal task force, we would let him know that there's been a request to have maybe bullet point reports sent out, right?
That's the plan, and the way we understand this is that we're going to give a little report to Eric, who's going to give a bigger report to Field Cersei, who's going to do a newsletter, that'll be included in that newsletter, because we do want y'all to have that information. And that's a great point.
You know, we can be more engaged.
Yeah, and not only will we give you the information, we'll tell you how to give us feedback, because we want it, and we know that, you know, nobody's got a lock on great ideas. So if we aggregate together, we'll have all the great ideas figured out. Patty, did you want to say?
Well, I just wanted to say about the funding of Obamacare and why they couldn't do the whole thing was because they bypassed the congressional process and they funded it straight from the Treasury.
Right.
So that's why they couldn't defund it all.
They had an opportunity. The House of Representatives could have defunded it had it been funded through discretionary spending. No. They tricked us again, and they attached it to the Treasury directly, which is controlled by, what was it, Timothy Geithner? Yeah, it is horrible. It's absolutely unbelievable, the deception, the stratagem that went on in that bill. So, you know, a little bit like the splosh. But in any event, we're fighting it. And I'm not saying that as a general rule for the Tea Party. I'm saying that I'm in the health insurance business, so I'm fighting it. But thank you for giving me a quick moment.
Thank you, Mark.
I meant to make just one more comment. You mentioned these regulatory agencies making law.
That's right.
Well, that violates the very first sentence of the Constitution. Says all legislative authority herein granted is vested in Congress. Now, if that regulatory agency is making a law where there's not a specific underlying law passed by Congress, that's absolutely void on its face. So they can't do that. The whole purpose, folks, of our studying the Constitution is being able to hold our officials accountable. And when we see them violating things like this, we need to start calling our reps and say, why are you tolerating this? We're going to stop.
And now we've got bat phones to do it. They know who you are, and they're going to listen to us. So that was a good meeting. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you, Mark. And Patty. And the rest of the federal task force. Got about 5 minutes here. Sue and Joyce, as far as the Gold Dome team, what's been going on this week, and what can we're expecting some activity next week, correct?
We really don't have anything this week.
Okay. Bill?
Next week.
Yeah.
But there's going to be some stuff coming up next week, correct? Bill?
I got a call
Come on.
from AJC.
Come on up. Let's go.
We can't hear you if you're not at the mic.
I got a call from Jeremy Redmond today from the AJC, and he wanted to know what I thought about the governor sort of being quiet now about immigration. He's not saying much. After he had campaigned on, having being pro enforcement with immigration, and also that all of the businesses in the state would be using E-Verify. And now he's sort of like upping or being a limp spaghetti. So he just, I reiterated the points that he told me. Those points right there, I said, well, that's one of the reasons I voted for him, because he was strong against immigration. And I'm not happy that he's coming out now and, stuttering or keeping quiet. Yeah. So, I don't know what he's going to write. He's not pro-enforcement, he's anti-enforcement. That whole paper is. And so we'll see what comes out of it. But, I sort of equated it to, like, he was all for pro-enforcement, deal was, and then now he's being quiet about it, and it's sort of like a week or so ago when Grover Norquist came out against the tax proposal and said that it was a tax increase, and a week later somebody gave him some money, and so then he says, well, it's revenue neutral. It is not revenue neutral. It's a tax increase.
Thank you, Bill. All right, now the immigration enforcement bill that we've endorsed, HB 87, should be going up for a vote out of the committee next week.
Yes.
We're expecting that. Okay, Pat.
Okay.
DA.
And he asked me point blank, in looking in my eyes, whether I had emailed any of my, my representatives or my senators. And I had to say the truth was no, I had not done it yet. And he said, I'm getting weary, and we all need to email, call, and call.
The committee we're dealing with non-civil. I believe Representative Rich Golick is the chairman of that committee, correct? We need some phone calls and some emails going out. Absolutely. And many of our goals. They're voting on it Friday? All right. All right. Activity next week. Be looking out for some emails and some information coming out. I also want to take Randy, where are you? Randy has stepped up to take the lead in our reading and research team and has been doing an excellent job of digging through legislation, our research efforts. And I want. That being said, you were here last week. You know that accusation was made. Came to the SPLOST for the opposing viewpoint to be heard here. I personally feel that accusation was justified. Therefore, we are about to have a very respectful and orderly discussion on the opposing viewpoints that opposing the viewpoint that this organization has taken regarding the SPLOST. That being said, I would like to introduce Mr. Heath Garrett from the Citizens for Cobb's Future. You want to come on up? Just be around the podium. It's picking me up right here for the recording.
Okay, so we need to put it down. Oh, so I don't pick it up and put it on.
If you're going to walk around, go ahead and do so. If you're just going to hang out on the podium, you can just sit.
Well, no, I can't sit still very long. Is that okay?
Yeah.
If I pick it up? I'll try to do that so you can capture everything. It's a pleasure to be with you all tonight. My name is Heath Garrett. I look around the room, I see about a third of you I recognize from other organizations like the Madison Forum or the Cobb Republican Party Breakfast or some campaign that we've worked on in the past. I'll give you a brief history of who I am and why I'm here, and then I think we can have a little lively Socratic dialogue, hopefully. I was born in Albany, Georgia. I went to the University of Georgia. I had the good fortune while I was at the University of Georgia of having an honors advisor who had been at the University of Chicago. For those of you who are true libertarians, and I mean not in the Neil Boortz, Ayn Rand sense, but I mean in the Federalist Society, true substantive libertarian mold, you'll know the University of Chicago is kind of the epicenter of true free market economics and social thought. It's the U.S. version of the School of Austria, out of Europe, that really helped defeat Nazism and all the great Austrian School of Economics. My professor was a Fulbright scholar from the University of Chicago, and actually was a good friend of and student with Milton Friedman. And while I was at the University of Georgia, he actually helped me do what we call an area studies major. So I studied political theory and philosophy rather than political science. I love the political science. I love talking about numbers and polling and all that. But at the end of the day, politics for me was not a science, and it's not a battle to be engaged in for the sake of the battle, but it's about ideas and ideals. And so as a student, I had a great opportunity to study under that professor. He then told me that there were no jobs for political philosophers, and so I needed to go to school. I went off to law school. I wrote on the law school exam that I want to be engaged in business and in politics, but I don't necessarily want to practice law. And 17, 18 years later, I practiced law for a little while with the law firm of Troutman Sanders, and then I had the good chance to go work with Johnny Isaacson in 1995. I've been at the state school board as an attorney and as a policy advisor. I've been the chief of staff for a U.S. House member. I've been the chief of staff for a U.S. senator. I have also helped run campaigns throughout Georgia, and our firm does campaigns all over the country. The firm that I'm a part of now managed George Bush's campaigns. We managed all the way back. They were part of the Reagan administration. My two partners were part of the Lee Atwater world and everything else. So I'm involved in politics full time, but I'm a Cobb resident. And like you, I approach these issues from that of a fiscal conservative. If we did a poll today, like we talked about, we're kind of all, friends with sincere but probably deep differences about what we should do about this Cobb Splice. But I will say that I tell you all that to tell you that we approach the issue probably from basically the same philosophy. If you and I were to take a poll today on all the major issues before us, would agree 98% of the time, on whether it's Obamacare or whether it's immigration policy. Matter of fact, for some of you, I might be a little bit farther to the right than you are, and for some of you, you might be a little bit farther to the right than I am. I want you to know where I come from, and then how I got to the point where I'm working with the Citizens for Cobb's Future. I also want to commend you real quick too, because I think it's important to know this. I worked on probably 30 races last year. I only worked on 4 of them very extensively, and some version of the Tea Party, whether it was the predecessor to the Georgia Tea Party, the Georgia Tea Party, were integral in all of these elections, and your voice was heard. I want to commend you and those of you who were involved over the last 18 months. There have been a lot of reform movements in the past that never really got legs or never got together. Now, the Tea Party movement itself is definition and by philosophy a decentralized group. Last year in our campaigns, Mitch and I worked with, we put it together in an Excel spreadsheet. There are over 100 LLCs, doing business as or of some form of the Tea Party in Georgia alone today. It might be up to 110, Tom. You guys keep up with this more. So not just here, not just in Cobb County, not just in there are 100, 110 plus organizations like yours, and I can tell you from that standpoint of having run these campaigns that y'all were an integral part of helping us take back the House and get as close as we were in the Senate. I also want to talk about one of the things I think you guys are doing, which is incredibly important, and something that's been on my mind for a long time, which is transparency and accountability. I mean, if you are a true conservative, then you believe in the First Amendment. And why do you believe in the First Amendment? You believe First Amendment because it gives you the right to redress your grievances before your government and freedom of the press. And some of you know my father-in-law. He's the champion of open meetings, open records, not only in the state but in this nation. And I'm a big proponent of that. And what the Tea Party has done beyond Cobb County. In Cobb County, we don't really need to preach open meetings, open records, right? We live it because we have a newspaper that stays on top of that and preaches it to our elected officials and holds them accountable by law. Our law firm, by represents a lot of newspapers in going after local entities, state entities, and federal entities who don't abide by the open meetings, open records law. But I think the one thing that the Tea Party's done is brought some accountability and some transparency to government at all levels. And so what you've done with your committees, breaking them out to a local committee, a state committee, a federal committee, and being involved as individuals is you to continue to do levels. Now that brings us to a question, though, and I think you've all been debating this. It's a question of, okay, we won the House, we came close to taking back the Senate. There are 110 Tea Party chapters in probably 3,000 across the nation. Some are 2 people, some are 200 people, some are 20 people. Some are closely aligned with local Republican organizations. Some are closely aligned with local libertarian organizations. Some are closely aligned with taxpayer alliances and organizations. And some are aligned with all kinds of who knows what groups. And when you ask the average person in this room to define what it means to be a member of the Tea Party, you get almost as many different answers as you do the same answers. And so we're all at a crossroads in this movement. And I, by the way, identify myself. When they call and poll and say, do you identify yourself with the Tea Party movement? I say yes, because for me it's about fiscal conservative policies, and so I do align myself in that regard. But when we talk about where does the Tea Party go from now, I think this SPLOST is symbolic of the larger question. Right? Is the Tea Party, is the Georgia Tea Party, is the Cobb County Tea Party, is the National Tea Party, is it a collection of people who are against everything and all of government? Is it some modification? Where on the spectrum does it stand? Is it just a party of individuals who are around fiscal conservative issues? Are we going to address social issues? Are we going to address, what are we going to do about abortion? What are we going to do about homosexual marriage? I mean, all these questions are all bubbling up. And it's not just at this Tea Party chapter. It's at every Tea Party chapter in Georgia and all across the nation. It's a question of, okay, we've got to govern now in the House. And we don't control the federal government, but we do control the state legislature. And in other places around the country, we control the local government. Conservatives do have a majority. And so it's a question of how are we as identifiers, or you as activists in the Georgia Tea Party, going to engage? I would argue that one of the areas that you ought to consider not being just in a natural reaction against something is Cobb County government. Cobb County government, we are the model for the Tea Party. That's why its birthplace is here in Cobb County. And number 2, the SPLOST concept itself was birthed here in Cobb out of the fiscally conservative movement of the late 70s and early 80s by Reaganites who were free market, who identified and became the birthplace for the fair tax movement. They identified that the best way if we were going to go back and recreate the tax code today, instead of the income tax, everybody would have pushed the consumption tax. So the SPLOST is an originally fiscally conservative concept passed by the most fiscally conservative members of the state legislature based upon the very principles that we all agree with. So I don't think we're here to disagree with that. I mean, if you support the fair tax in concept, then you support the concept of the SPLOST. Actually, the SPLOST is a superior...
Sir,
yeah.
I would like to know why you're speaking for other people. You're saying we. You're saying we. I believe each person has the ability to examine an issue, to examine legislation, and make their own decisions about whether they support a piece of legislation or not.
I agree.
I take offense for you saying that you speak for we.
I'm sorry. I did not mean, I apologize, and I did not mean to offend you at all. The collective we the people is at the beginning of the Constitution and is the preamble. It was not meant to include that I'm trying to preclude you from having a difference of opinion with me. I just meant we as, there's a group of us as conservatives who do agree with some of the I'm trying to espouse here conceptually, but I definitely did not mean to offend the lady in the back row there tonight.
We have time at the end of this talk for questions, and we are going to hold our questions until then.
So again, if I offend anybody, I apologize. So I think conceptually, SPLOST is something that we ought to, as fiscal conservatives, view as a generally positive use in local government. And so that's the reason. When I approach SPLOST, I don't support all SPLOST, by the way. And I'm actually the guy who's been pushing for the last decade that we split the penny. It was Johnny Isaacson and I who went to the local delegation a decade ago after the 1997 E-SPLOST, and we said to the guys, y'all need to be talking about splitting the penny. There's going to come a day when growth slows down and our revenues catch up that we're not going to need in Cobb County both a full 1 penny E-SPLOST and a full 1 penny T-SPLOST. I want you to know conceptually, I've been pushing that for over a decade. I'm here tonight to help make the argument that, though, that you had a tremendous impact on the front end of the 20 public meeting to make the point that we didn't need a 6-year SPLOST, but the elected officials did listen to you. You know, this is not an argument like Washington, D.C., where they're not listening to you. This is not an argument like the state legislature where it's hard to contact them. We have a very fiscally conservative government here. And we all heard all the facts last night. I mean, they don't just hand out AAA bond ratings. Right? They don't just hand those out. We're the model. Matter of fact, most of the other 37 counties that had them have AAA bond ratings. Came to Cobb County to learn how we did it. And our SPLOST is an integral part of the reason why we have it. It doesn't necessarily mean that you lose overnight if we don't vote the SPLOST in on March 15th, but you cannot deny that it's one of the reasons why those bond rating agencies give us a AAA bond rating. Our infrastructure is in better shape. So my point is that reasonable, fiscally conservative, very ideologically conservative individuals can actually look at this SPLOST and go, you know what? I can support this SPLOST. There's been debate about whether or not it should be 6 years or 5 years. The elected officials talked about, and some of the bureaucracy came forward with a 6-year plan. They actually cut it by a third because of the input from the public out there. So it's not that they weren't listening. I know some in this room have stated they support a 3-year version of the SPLOST. So some in this room are already, there's a 75% agreement that there's a need for some part of it. Now, whether or not we're arguing, some in this room might be for 1 year, some are for no years, and those kind of things. I just want you to know, I'm making the argument that you can be a true free market fiscal conservative and not only support the concept of the SPLOST, but support this particular SPLOST, and actually, I would make the argument that we, meaning those of us who agree with my original premise, actually should be talking about how we convert more of the Cobb County-based financing to a consumption-based tax, only in exchange for the equivalent reduction in property taxes. But it's a much more fiscally conservative manner of raising revenue. And the genius of the SPLOST is that there is a sunset. And this is why I say the SPLOST is actually superior to the federal fair tax concept. By the way, Rob Woodall and I were classmates at the University of Georgia Law School. We've been good friends for a long time. And you know, he's the guy who wrote the book. I mean, John Linder helped him write the book, but Rob's the true author of the book. When you look at the SPLOST, I think you ought to look at it and you ought to be saying, converting more of our property taxes to, we can't convert any more debt. We essentially have no debt. We have a small amount of debt. I think it's, and Lance may know this, a total of $47 million at most. The percentage of $1 billion budget is so small, we have to maintain that debt in order to maintain a bond credit rating, which then reduces our costs in many other ways. So what I say is we don't have any debt. We couldn't take the SPLOST and eliminate debt with it. We essentially can't do that, but we could offset it with property taxes. I think as fiscal conservatives, I hope you'll stop and you'll think about whether or not should we not only be funding these projects with a consumption tax that's paid for equitably by everybody who participates and uses the majority of our infrastructure, and whether or not we ought to be extending this to other parts of the budget. Now, I would only agree with that, by the way, in exchange for it has to be written into the actual SPLOST legislation that you have to get the consummate reduction, which is part of the problem that the fair tax is having at the national level. So I just want y'all to think about there are fiscal conservatives, free market-based fiscal conservatives, and there are people who are members of the Tea Party and or identify with the Tea Party who are supportive of this SPLOST and have actually been working hard to make sure it wasn't a 6-year, but it is a 4-year, which is a 33% reduction from the beginning, and made sure that your voices were listened to. Now, not all of your voices were heard, but I will say this. Even the first time I read the United States Constitution, as much as I'm a constitutionalist, I do not agree with 100% of the Constitution. Does anybody in here agree wholeheartedly with every word in the U.S. Constitution? Is it a perfect document? Is it a perfect document? It's pretty darn close. But the Founding Fathers did what? They created an amendment process, right? They created an amendment process. Do you believe all those amendments? We made a mistake. Prohibition, was it a mistake? Was it not a mistake, right? I mean, so is it a perfect document? I don't think it's a perfect document. There's never been a perfect piece of legislation, at least in my lifetime, and I'm pretty sure in your lifetime. So as Lance's former boss used to say, what's the quote? Someone who's 80% my friend is not 20% my enemy, right? And that's the man, right? And so I think that when we look at this legislation, okay, sure. Right, a great man. And I'll be glad to, Mike, yes, ma'am.
Would you mind sharing with us what part of the Constitution you don't agree with or you don't like?
Before we do that.
Yeah, I will. I'll be glad to tell you. Yeah.
I am very aware of the time, and I've scheduled it very carefully. You have 1 minute and 30 seconds to complete your remarks if you're not done. And then we need to go.
Oh, let's just go ahead. Let's just go ahead and well, why don't we do that? So yeah, and I feel a little bit like Daniel in the lion's den here. So
we've had a first question asked.
Well, I didn't agree. I did not agree with the Prohibition Amendment, and I'm trying to think. I'm thinking through all the interpretations that the court has done. I know, and we came back and fixed it. I'm trying to run through the. I'm thinking through all the interpretations the Supreme Court has had of different versions of the Constitution. I'd like to clarify. I'd like to clarify the Commerce Clause. I think that the Equal Protection Clause needs clarification. I think that the Equal Protection Clause would need some clarification. Those kind of things.
I'd like to know. What is our next question? Can I see a show of hands?
And I'll answer.
Folks, we're going to have an orderly discussion. Can I see a show of hands who has a question specifically about the SPLOST?
I do.
Right here, and then we're going to go over here.
What's the mechanism to tie property tax reduction into the way the bill is trying to?
Yeah. Well, what you could do is you could the question is, what could you do to actually tie the property tax reduction, the mechanism?
In the bill.
Yeah, you can currently reduce property taxes using the SPLOST revenue.
But it's not built into the bill.
Right, it's not. Yeah, so what you would need to do is. Right. Right, which is why I said, in the ideal world, if I were working on this, I would be advocating when they reform this to make sure you have some offset there. And that's actually part of, if I remember correctly, in the splitting of the penny legislation, there's something in there that allows, or kind of forces everybody to focus on reducing some property taxes with it. So I think that's I absolutely agree with you on that.
All right, our next question.
And by the way, just so you know, historically the SPLOST did reduce property taxes. It used to be 12.9 mills, and now it's 9.8 mills, which is the lowest of any county of any size in the state of Georgia. And it's because of the SPLOST that those mills are down.
Next question is going to come from Richard, then we're going to go over here in the back. Third question.
Yes, sir, Richard.
Let me just say quickly, I've known Heath for 15 years, more or less. Heath is an honorable, good man, okay? So,
thank you, Richard.
Agree or disagree, he's a trustworthy guy. Now, you've made a wonderful presentation about why his SPLOST tax itself is a good thing. you have not given me one reason why we need this SPLOST tax.
Right. Okay. Well,
let me just take that a little further. Okay? I think what probably the problem is with a lot of us that are against this right now is we know how inefficient government is. We know there's tremendous waste. We know that in bureaucracies, that's the worst way in the world to manage your money. And they probably want to do a lot of things we don't need. Okay? Absolutely. So, especially in this time right now where we're going bankrupt at every level in this country. So, I'm not so sure we don't need to squeeze things back down to what we've got instead of just making it easy for them to keep on spending our money in ways that aren't too efficient.
Richard, we have known each other a long time. I actually was cut off before I got to the specifics of the current SPLOST, so I'm glad you asked the question because that's dead on. I think that the answer is twofold. One is obviously everybody's definition of need versus want is going to be slightly different, huge, and in some cases huge. So I want to start out by saying that I agree with you that there's tremendous amount of waste and fraud and abuse at all levels of government. However, I think that here in Cobb County, we are the example of how local government functions well. Is it perfect? Again, I don't believe that there's ever been a perfect piece of legislation or governing body, but I do think it's as close to perfection as we get in this nation at the local level. And I would distinguish from you that your frustration with spending and bureaucracy and debt is at the state and at the federal level, because county is not about to go bankrupt. We're one of the few counties that's not, because of the way we've managed both property tax dollars and SPLOST dollars. So we're a unique situation. I think that's an important distinction for Tea Party supporters to recognize. Let's not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We ought to be taking the concepts that Cobb County government has applied over the last 3 decades and applying them to the federal and the state level. We ought to be telling them. Now, on the needs side, I'll tell you, here's why I think that at least 95% of these projects are needs. Because there's a little city just down the street named Atlanta, Georgia, right? Atlanta, Georgia, who for only about a decade refused to invest in their infrastructure. But it only took about a decade for them to not properly invest in their infrastructure. They didn't take care of the basics of the infrastructure, and now it's costing them an estimated 2 to 3 times what it would have cost them had they maintained care of it, or done the resurfacing, or taking care of the roofs, and all these other kind of things. So now there's a legitimate debate out there about whether or not you need that today or 6 months from now. But very few people who've looked at this say that you can delay it significantly into the future without raising the costs to the taxpayer over time. So that's why I view them as needs, because we have 725,000 people in this county. We have a tremendous amount of infrastructure, and you don't have a county that had a lot of bloat. We had the lowest budget and the lowest taxes of any the state before the recession hit. They've already cut over $40 million from the budget. We're not Fulton County. We're not DeKalb. There's not a lot of fluff out there.
You're still painting with a broad brush because you're talking about all these infrastructures. I'd like to know some examples of specifically what needs to be done and what cannot be done if you go to this block.
Briefly, because I want to get someone more.
Well, I don't think, I mean, none of the transportation projects that are in there, which is the most critical part of your infrastructure, will not be able to be funded under current economic conditions without raising other taxes for a significant period of time. We're talking about the real estate market not coming back till 2014 or 2015 at best.
Well, what part of the transportation structure? Give me
we're going to cut another $40 million out of the general fund in the next 12 months alone in Cobb County. So none of those projects would get funded.
See, I don't know. All right, next question right here.
Well, I mean, if you haven't looked, it's available online at Cobb SPLOST. Right. So I mean,
next question.
Can we?
Hey, I want to know what is the SPLOST money this time if we vote for it? What is it going to be used for? Amen.
Two things. There is a list of several hundred projects available at www.cobbsplosh. I can't go through every project tonight. The congressman's waiting on us here. There were 24 public meetings. Y'all, many of you were in attendance. I'm glad to point you in the right direction, but and then it goes into effect in the January of 2012 is when it would go into effect, on January 1st of 2012.
Folks, we're going to take 3 more questions. Beth.
Thank you, and thank you, Heath, for coming. It's really courageous of you.
Thank you.
Last night, Lance made a really good point that I don't think has been discussed enough by the proponents of the SPLOST, and that is that these become self-perpetuating funding of infrastructure.
Right.
You just said that Cobb County has a significant infrastructure, and these continue to build upon that infrastructure, which in the long run costs us more to continue to maintain. It's like a bubble that keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
I agree.
Do you see that bubble bursting?
I see, and I think that we will have caught up with the growth of the county. We're lagging, the infrastructure always lags growth. I think that we will have caught up within the next 2 to 3 years, depending upon growth patterns. I think we've already reached that point with the E-SPLOST. And so I think there's a legitimate debate as to whether or not we need to get the E-SPLOST in sync with the T-SPLOST at some point in time in the next 2 to 3 years, so we can reduce a total penny after this one's passed, and so that we can reduce a total penny down and split those pennies. I think it's a question of, now if we have another growth boom, right? If you have another boom and you add another 150,000 people to the county, then you're going to have school issues and you're going to have more road issues. I think that and that's why I say, and by the way, I am addressing that. As I said, it was a decade ago that right after the E-SPLOST in 1998 that we first introduced the concept of the split penny. I'm pleased to tell you that your county commission and your city councils all endorsed that concept of splitting the penny, and it's your local delegation in Cobb County that are introducing it. Now, there's a lot of opposition to that in the state, but it's not here in Cobb County. That's the distinction I want to make. Cobb County elected officials are acting fairly responsibly about all this. Right, and I think that's a whole different whale that I think you all ought to look at in difference. The difference is, right? The difference is that fiscally conservative, we want government done locally because we're closer to the people, so that you can have these town hall meetings, it can be transparent, and you can focus on what the project lists are and access your elected officials. That's my way. I'm not going to satisfy everybody, and
We've got 2 more questions.
I don't want to be disrespectful to the congressman.
I understand. Congressman, if I'm being disrespectful, I apologize. Sheila.
I think the thing that upset me the most was the fact that this is being done at the cost of $400,000 to hold this when it could have been done in a general election.
Right.
Don't even show up for when it's off the general election. And consequently, you've got teachers that show up, and all the city workers and so forth, and the average citizen aren't even aware that it's going on. And that's what upset me about it. I think it should have been held off for the next general election when the community as a whole could have...
I understand that argument. I think the legislature correctly designated 4 times, I think it's 3 times, and then the general election every 2 years to allow for the financing of government, not just through SPLOST or LOST or HOST, but also through bond referendums and all the other local elections that ought to occur. And by doing that, because Cobb County is size, every time we have a special election, whether it's a city or anything else, cost us a certain amount of money. I would make the fiscal argument that either the delay of a year or 2 will actually cost you, the taxpayer, more money than the $400,000. But But that may not be satisfactory to you, and so I understand your argument, and I think that there's some people in the legislature want to change that. I think that county and local governments need the flexibility to be able to time their bond revenues. Now, one myth is that SPLOST do better in smaller elections than in larger elections, but I want to say that's a myth. There were 11 SPLOST on the general election ballot last year in the region, and they all passed. So they actually, the science is they do equally. And I can tell you that the decision about the timing of this SPLOST was not based on politics. It was based on the findings of continuing it on January the 1st of 2012 or so. But legitimate argument. My father-in-law and I disagree about this every time we get together for dinner.
In the back.
He agrees with you.
Yesterday, and you were talking about infrastructure.
Right.
And we're going to lose the mighty bond, AAA bond thing. Infrastructure is roads, bridges, right? Do you agree with that?
Well, water, sewers, buildings, utility pipes.
But just to sake of argument, wasn't that what she's talking about? Infrastructure. That's what Bill Byrne talked about us and bringing people in. It's the roads, it's the bridges, it's the water, those kind of things. Right.
I mean,
that was like 86 million. We had 3 projects in there, which one was in Kennesaw, one was Windy Hill, one was Macklin. Those are new projects, and essentially those are the only new things I can see on the budget. I might be wrong. So my question is, you got somewhere, you pick a number, $100, $110 million of infrastructure, and you're talking about split penny, which is an excellent idea. I'm sure the school board's going to come down the road with us and want their penny too. And so, we're up against the wall. The state of Georgia just announced they missed 500 billion. So from every government entity, Cobb County is out 28 million. So you just mentioned they're going to restructure. So we're all in this together. And, just help us understand if we could do this better at a different day. That's what we do.
Well, you could postpone this.
It wouldn't cost that much money because you're lopping out all the... You've got an event planning center in Kennesaw, and they've got an event built. So, we look at all this and say,
Right. I don't disagree with it. Some of you can find a few of those things. Thank you all for having me. Look forward to working with you in the future. I've got one suggestion for Richard. What I'd really like for him to do is take 2 of these yard signs, put some duct tape on them, and walk around the grocery store with them on both sides of them. That's the only way you can advertise more, right? Enthusiasm right there.
Go. Lance, I want to give you 60 seconds to respond if you would like to. And then we're moving on. Jeff, you want to come on up?
First of all, I want to encourage you coming into this line.
Amen.
I know that if I was invited to speak to his group, now that would probably never happen. But if I was, I would go. I disagree with just about everything that Heath has to say, but there's one thing that he said that's absolutely and categorically wrong about the date of the election. They could have had it last November, and there would have been no break whatsoever. Right. Wouldn't have cost anybody anything extra. Would have saved the taxpayers $400,000. And if they're telling you that there's no politics involved in when these elections are being held, they're telling you a lie.
Thank you, All right, quickly, folks. The decision to have Heath out tonight to speak on this topic was mine and mine alone. If anyone has an issue with that point of view being presented here tonight, you may speak with me after the meeting. Also, if you have any issues with how this discussion was conducted, you may also speak with me and me alone after the meeting. When I look at the SPLOST, folks, when I stop. Folks, we don't have time. When I look at the SPLOST, I see a principal disagreement among friends. And when I look at the enthusiasm that this issue is being met with on both sides, I am so thankful because I long for the day when the most pressing issues we have before us are principal disagreements among friends. I long for that day and I fight for it every day of my life. That being said, I want to conclude this meeting of the Georgia Tea Party. Turn it over to Jeff Martin with the Cobb County Chapter of Americans for Prosperity. Jeff Martin.
Thank you, Michael. My name is Jeff Martin, and I am humbled to be a member of the Georgia Tea Party, as well as your chairman for the Cobb County chapter of Americans for Prosperity. Thank you all for being here this evening. Couple of things that I would like to talk about first. I will not voice my opinion on the SPLOST because I'm representing a couple of the organizations here, so I'll leave that for later. Folks, we are at the critical time in our country. We are at a defining point. So we'll have something a little different tonight. I want to tell you about the agenda. First of all, I'm going to make a couple of announcements. I'm going to invite our state director for AFP up here, Virginia Galloway. Virginia, come on up. Then what we'll do is introduce our featured speaker, U.S. Congressman Tom Price, and then at the end, if you will, please be respectful and hold your questions to the end, because I will rise up and ask you to hold your questions. Please be respectful of one another. Please be respectful of the congressman. He will give his speech of what he's going to talk about the new Congress. He'll be glad to engage you in any of the questions in the Q&A session. At 5 minutes before 9, I'm respectful of his time as well as each of yours and ours. I'll come up here at 5 till 9. We'll take 2 additional questions. Tonight, I'm going to close in a prayer for our country. I received this book this past week, and the title of this book is God Bless America, Prayers and Reflections for Our Country. So at the end, on the last question, if you would please refrain from getting up and moving around, I'm going to close us with prayer and dismiss us, and then we'll be adjourned for the evening. Thank you very much. First, we're going to have the Defending the Dream Summit coming up on Saturday, April the 30th at the Chattahoochee Technical College in Jacksonville. A lot of you all attended last year. We had Herman Cain and